Our next session is a discussion, our first panel of the event. We have incredible leaders from Arizona State University. 18 years ago, Julianne Wrigley, who is also a resident of Sun Valley, we're very fortunate to have her here, said to the leaders of Arizona State University, we need to create an institute for sustainability before any university was really having this discussion about the urgency of these issues. So Julie Wrigley, Amanda Ellis, who's the head of partnerships of the Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory at Arizona State University, and Peter Schlosser, the vice provost and head of the Global Futures Lab, are here with us to talk about the journey they're on, and we're going to hear from some of the students as well. So please join me in welcoming Amanda, Peter, and Julie to the stage.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā rangatiratanga. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings in Māori, the indigenous language of Aotearoa, New Zealand, my home country. And that greeting talks about honouring the mana, the wisdom in this room, and the rangatiratanga, the leadership. But as our brilliant previous speaker just said, 1 and 1 never equals 2. And that could not be more the case with these two brilliant individuals who I'm honoured to moderate a conversation with today. And in fact, we're going to tell you some stories, because the story of the Global Institute of Sustainability at ASU and the first School of Sustainability in the US was one that blew me away when I first met the incredible Julie Wrigley, who was the founding benefactor of that first Global Institute. So Julie, tell us a little bit about how you came up with the idea of sustainability as a global issue when it was just a gleam in the eye of ambassadors like me at the UN. Tell us a little bit about the origin story.
Well, probably some of you have heard at the very least bits and pieces. I was born with a strange gene, and that gene at a very early age said, what's wrong in our earth when I look out from the cliff where I grew up in Southern California and I saw the view to Catalina Island becoming more and more obscure. And I saw the abalone on the rocks disappearing. Now that's a strange thing to observe as a child, but I did observe it. So throughout my young education, I was aware of things that nobody talked about. And as I went through school, including law school in the mid-70s, I was asking questions that had no relevance to people. And in school, I looked for courses to take. There were none. After that, I spent very few years practicing law. And even then, believe it or not, the world of thinking about the environment, my first job was oil and gas financing documents in a law firm. And then I went to work happily in a chewing gum company. Once again, no relevance to this long-standing passion. Unfortunately, 25 years later, I was widowed, and finally it was time to look at what I wanted to do for that long-standing passion. And I was able to look at what probably wasn't even called sustainability, but there were whispers of it. But it had to do with the climate, it had to do with the environment, and words would tumble out. We were no longer environmentalists because environmentalists were burning buildings. So I was a conservationist, and lots of things were rumbling around. But I was very fortunate. I met an amazing man who became president of Arizona State University, having talked to my alma mater, Stanford, University, and Amy's, by the way. And they didn't understand what I was talking about. And what I was talking about was it was time for a university to tear down silos, have everybody talking together, the same conversation, the same looking for answers to what was happening around us. And we needed to do it together, and we needed to do it quickly. We were then, 18 years ago, just beginning to talk about the impacts on our climate and biodiversity and the new languages. But finally I found an entity that was willing not only to talk about it, but to do something about it. That was the beginning of my relationship and the Global Institute of Sustainability, and now the Global Institute of Sustainability and Innovation, and the Global Futures Laboratory.
Well, Julie, you've been such a pioneer and a visionary, so thank you so much. And I also just wanted to tell everybody, Julie had a quid pro quo when she first spoke to Stanford, and she said, I want every student to graduate with a sustainability competency. And when they said no, she said, well, I'm going to go elsewhere. And Michael Crow thought it was a brilliant idea. And every student now at Arizona State University graduates with a sustainability competency. When I first met Julie, I thought, oh, that can't be true. And I was speaking at a graduate student conference and mentioned this. And I had a young man come up to me afterwards, and he said, I'm an engineering student at ASU, and I want you to know it's all real, and I'm going to be a very different kind of engineer. So when I told Julie that, she said, it's working. And the next phase of this journey, this incredible journey, came about when Peter Schlosser, to my left, who is the Vice President and Vice Provost for the Global Futures Laboratory and one of the world's leading Earth scientists, co-chair of the Earth League with Johan Rockström, who you've been hearing about with Planetary Boundaries. And I think you will have on your seat the 10 new insights in climate science that the Earth League, which Johan and Peter co-chair together, produced for COP26. So Peter had been at the Earth Institute with Michael Crow and Jeffrey Sachs, and like Julie, had begun to see what was happening, but with the realization, as Julie had had, that sustainability was no longer enough. We needed to be looking at drawdown, and we needed to be looking at indigenous wisdom as the basis for futures, and we needed to be looking at circular economy, the transdisciplinary approach that Julie spoke about. And Peter, with his brilliant brain, designed the Global Futures Laboratory, which is an extraordinary, revolutionary approach to research, to higher education, to partnerships, and to solutions. So Peter, tell us a little bit about how you came to your vision and how you see that vision turning into action.
So, as always, Amanda is way too kind. What drove me, actually, from childhood, I was living in the fields of southwestern Germany at the River Rhine, where I grew up, and I saw many things changing as similar to what Julie described. But the real realization of what kind of change we are facing came during the early years of my studies. I studied physics at the University of Heidelberg at that time, going to the Arctic Ocean. And there I saw almost between a few years how the sea ice disappeared, in essence, in front of our eyes. So you started to see more and more warnings. Of course, you also read about temperature increases. You started to see all these effects of human pressure onto our planet. And that got me from physics to environmental science, earth engineering to sustainable development, and now looking at the future of our planet. In essence, the overall context is that, as we have heard all afternoon, humankind increasingly puts pressure onto the planet that our planet cannot withstand. So we are seeing the planet actually talking back to us, saying, you are looking for having a world that's 10 times bigger than what I am, the planet, and you are asking me to give you services that I simply cannot give anymore. And that's where the planetary boundaries are coming in. That's where we are seeing issues of more and more extremes playing out in different places, different kinds, higher amplitudes, higher frequency. Now, if we're looking at that picture and our role in it, it's clear that we have to use every part of society to look at how to counter that, how to get off a trajectory that's strictly non-sustainable to one that keeps us in what the planetary boundary theory says is a safe operating space for humanity. In essence, leave a future behind in which the next generation still have choices. We are decreasing the option space for the next generations at a pace that is breathtaking. So then, being at an academic institution, the question is, what is our responsibility? We are mandated by society. We are not living in a free space, as a lot of academics actually think they do. We have the mandate by society to produce the knowledge that leads society into a safe future. What does that mean in today's world? It means in a framework that we have, where we have a lot of problems, to transform complex systems. We have heard about complex systems. We have heard about the need to transform through innovation. And the ultimate complex system is the Earth system. We already have heard that it's not just about climate, it's not just about energy, it's not just about food security. These are all things that hang together. So we have to understand how we got ourselves into such a mess and how we can actually get out of that by making different choices. What that means is understand all the physical biogeochemical parts of the Earth system, how they function, how they are damaged, how we can get them back on track. But most importantly, we have to understand how humans make decisions. What drives them to make the choices that have led us into this undesirable position, and what incentives can we use to move out of that. And so, to close that out, the way we then designed the Global Futures Laboratory, which is named after Julie as the real driver of the idea early on, is to say we have to discover new things, we have to create a learning space in which students can take in information in a different way, in a way that's that comes much more easy to the way they take in information in their general life. We have to take that combination of new insight and the way it's being used into what we call the solution space, where we figure out what can we do about the multitude of problems that we have created. We have heard about partnerships and networks, so we have to do that together with others. We cannot do it alone. And then the final and probably most important part of the design is what we call an engagement space. Academia has to become much more integrated again into society and has to have that constant exchange with society to truly understand where are the problems, how are they hitting people, how are people reacting to that, and what can we do to take the knowledge that we have to deploy it in a way that can actually have an effect. So that's what we have done and what is now operational, and what we see as the next step of creating knowledge, not just for the sake of having knowledge and publish it, but for making it work for all of us.
Fantastic. And this idea of use-inspired research is something that really comforted me, because when I ran the development agency for New Zealand, I was always going to our universities and saying, okay, we've got these really complex, multifaceted environmental and societal issues to solve, notably in the Pacific region, which was where the majority of our work was. And they would say, but no, I do this discipline or I do that discipline. So it was so refreshing to meet Julie and Michael Crow and Peter to see this transdisciplinary approach that is use-inspired. And there's a very exciting partnership going on right now on campus with Starbucks. So we're helping Starbucks become people and planet positive by 2025. And there's a whole set of groups of students who are working on these issues. We also have a wonderful partnership with Starbucks where any barista can finish a degree online at ASU. And they have a success coach. It's a really interesting, innovative way of looking at things. And I think for Julie, just knowing our conversations about your passion about just and regenerative global futures and your commitment to partnership, there's many things that I could talk about. I see you with Nainoa Thompson and the Polynesian Voyaging Society and this grounding in Indigenous wisdom in Hawaii. I see you with Sir Peter Gluckman on the International Science Council and really making sure that the social sciences have a seat at the table with hard sciences. And you're also a high-level judge and a co-chair of the We Empower UN Sustainable Development Goal Challenge. And it was wonderful to see the rubric of the Sustainable Development Goals in the previous presentation. And WE stands for Women Entrepreneurs. We heard from Joshua why it's so important to include women. And Julie's been a champion for all of these causes. So Julie, pick one and tell us a little bit about why you're passionate about the power of partnership.
Well, a couple of things that I missed before is to tell you that some of the conditions that were part of creating the partnership with ASU, and in this case not Stanford, were tearing down the silos or getting outside the boundaries of the envelope, were partnerships all over the world, internal partnerships, and just anything that would break up the old habits. And because we already recognized the way we had been doing things was not working for the future. And we realized when Peter brought these astounding ideas with him that this was once again 18 years after the original founding of the Global Institute of Sustainability. It was time to shred the envelope again. So part of it was, and continues to be, in looking at these partnerships, and the reality was recognizing the importance of indigenous wisdom. So let's take Hawaii, for example. After Hawaii was discovered many, many hundreds of years ago, if not more. And it was discovered when the voyagers came from Tahiti and found, under a completely different system of following the stars and the waves and the birds, landed in Hawaii on the Big Island. And that wisdom is still around and carefully being passed down the generations. And there are now courses at Arizona State University that are helping pass down this wisdom. Because even having the special talents, the knowledge is still very, very hard to find. And we're helping the indigenous native population find a way to pass it along. And Nainoa Thompson is the navigator, and he's training people, and we're helping him find people to train. And you have an amazing person here in Sun Valley, one of the writers for the Rocky Mountain Express. I know it's the Express. I encourage you to pick it up tomorrow. It comes out Wednesday and Friday, has received numerous national awards, so I do encourage you to pick it up tomorrow. Anyway, and the other relationship that we have among many is recognizing women throughout the world who are doing some amazing things. And through this partnership with Diane von Furstenberg's foundation, they can win some significant awards and rewards for their work. And I'm just going to name a couple that you might find fascinating. One is a young woman who actually is a graduate and has her PhD from Arizona State University. She created a technology using satellites and AI to track floods anywhere on Earth, helping to provide early warning systems. Another gal from Australia, her company is called Soil Cyclers, and in mining, she recycles up to 500,000 cubic meters of soil each year across 50 different sites, and her innovative recycling methods help her clients in the environment by reducing waste and minimizing the amounts that end up in landfills, reducing the number of trucks on the local roads, and reducing the use of virgin resources. I have several more, I won't go on, but again, relationships and partnerships are key, and collaborations are key throughout the world to us.
Thank you so much, Julie. And this particular partnership, the We Empower UN SDG Challenge, was actually launched for us by the UN Secretary General and the President of the World Bank and the Council of Women World Leaders at the UN General Assembly in 2018. So it's now become a global competition with 193 countries who participate. And it's a real source of innovation, which of course is at the heart of the work that Peter is leading at the Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Lab. So Peter, tell us a little bit about some of the exciting new solutions so that we can all be hopeful about a future that is not going to end imminently, but with planetary boundaries and societal boundaries coming together, and the innovation that's coming out of the lab. What are some of the cool things?
So just again, in the context of where we are and what we have to do, we heard about the 9 boundaries, and they are typically, all of them actually, are of physical biogeochemical nature. The real issue that we have is the societal boundaries, our capacity to make choices that are in sync with what our planet can offer. And so looking at that, yes, we need technology, and that was mentioned before. We have to scale technology, we have to do it fast. All that is necessary, but it's not sufficient if we cannot understand how to actually take these in, apply them, and thereby really have a real impact on how the world works. And for that, we have to change the way we typically think about academia, which often is natural science focused. It is often still, as has been mentioned, aligned along disciplines. So we have done away with that to a large extent. We have created technologies such as a technology to take CO2 back out of the atmosphere. We have created technologies to map corals worldwide from satellites, airplanes, and from in situ observations. Corals are the most sensitive indicator of planetary health. So we have to understand how these systems work to get a sense of how sensitive the planet reacts to the perturbations we put upon it. We have created what we call the decision theater, which is a tool where we can actually bring decision makers together across all knowledge systems, including indigenous, including political, including scientific, to exchange in a way that leads to consensus about action that has to be done. So that's the kind of place that we have created. And maybe one way to describe that, we often say that we have to think outside the box, we have to shred the envelope and things like that. What I would say is the Global Futures Lab is a place where we are not just thinking outside the box. That's a place where we are willing to think the unthinkable. And I think that is what we need at this point in time to really leapfrog out of a trajectory that leads to nowhere onto one that actually creates a space for our youth to have a life as we had it.
And that's a perfect segue to some of the students that we have with us from Arizona State University, and Iveta Silova, who's going to stand up and wave. They're doing a panel on Wednesday. Iveta has an incredible partnership with UNESCO to bring youth voices to the forefront. So it's only fitting that we close with these youth voices. Go to the front, absolutely.
Climate change is the single greatest challenge for our generation. Of this, you are certainly all aware. I tell you this not to scare you, but to prepare you, to dare you to dream a different reality.
For it is the obscure, the oppressed, the poor, who when this disaster is declared done, still suffer more than anyone.
You don't need to be a politician to make it your mission to conserve, to protect, to preserve the one and only home that is ours, to use your unique powers to give next generations the planet we deserve.
There is no rehearsal for climate change reversal. The time is now, now, now.